All right, well, welcome, guys. I already asked these classes, these two, so I have to ask you guys, are you guys excited?
Yes.
All right, and what are we talking about today?
Soil.
Awesome. All right, with soil, we can do a lot of things. We can build stuff on it. We can grow stuff in it. The stuff we grow in it, animals eat, and then we get to eat them, which they're pretty tasty. But basically, soil is made up of three things. It's made up of sand, silt, and clay. And you guys, I think you guys just got done studying rocks, minerals? Okay. So a nice visual we have to kind of get that in our mind, those three particles, sand, silt, and clay, is that sand is the largest particle of those three. So if you think about it, this would be a sand particle, okay? Nice catch. All right. Then we have silt. Silt is a lot smaller. Sand's heavier. So we can get a lot more of these in an area than we can sand. So we've got sand, big, heavy, silt. Oh, hey, it didn't touch the ground. And then we have a clay particle, and I'm not going to throw this one. So clay is the smallest particle. It's really fine. We can get a lot of them packed into an area. Now sand, what do you think about sand when you go to the beach? What's it feel like? Yes. It's kind of soft on your feet. Squishy, kind of moves around. Sandy, feels sandy. Sand feels sandy. Feels kind of gritty. You know, when you pick it up, you know, kind of just falls through your fingers. When you build a sand castle and the waves come up, it doesn't really stay in form. It gets wiped out. Silt, it's kind of in between. If you would think of, have you ever been helping your mom bake in the kitchen and get your hand in the flour? That's what it feels, kind of floury. It just kind of moves around. Clay, it gets kind of slimy. You want to hold the clay particle? All right, you keep hold of that for me, all right? I want it back later, but you keep hold of it. It feels kind of slimy. But when last night I was playing around, I put some soil and some water, and I shook it up. You guys have a shake this morning? Have some chocolate milk? Yeah. So you know we had a lot of rain over the weekend, right? So if we looked at a stream that was nearby or a road ditch, it might have looked like this. But what happens is that stuff, or those different particles, that sand, silt, and clay, it'll settle out. And what do you think? Which one did I say was the heaviest? Sand. So it settles out first. And then which one do you think? Silt. It's the next heaviest, next biggest. So it's the next one to settle out. And then finally, clay. It's so fine that a lot of times it'll stay in suspension. Or it'll stay. That's what I did this one this morning. That's why that, you know, most of the stuff settled out in the bottom. I can just pass that around. Most of that stuff settled out in the bottom, but then it's still, some of it's still in suspension. So we've got, and then along with what the building blocks of soil, sand, silt, and clay, depending on how much of each one of those three things is in the soil, it gets classified as a silty clay loam, or a silt loam, or a loam. And the term loam means that there's pretty much an even mixture of all three of those particles in there. Each one of these sand, silt, and clay is considered a different, depending on how much of that's in the soil type, is a drainage class, how well water moves through it. How well do you think water would move through sand?
Really well.
Really well. Sand doesn't make very good mud pies, does it? They don't taste as good because they're kind of gritty. So what about clay? Clay is, yes sir.
Very hard for it.
It's small. We can get more of them packed in together. They're tighter, so water doesn't move through it as well. Clay has a tendency to suck up more water. And silt is kind of that in-between thing. So when we have sand, silt, and clay, we get this put together, then what we call soil is basically made up of four things. You've got the mineral portion, which you guys have talked about, the rocks, weathered. We call that parent material. You know, where did the soil come from? That's the parent material that it came from. So if it came from sandstone, it's probably got some sand in it because those particles are broke down. We also, that makes up not quite half of it. Then we have water. You know, we got a good bit of rain over the weekend. Most of our soils in this part of the country can hold 2 inches of rain, 2 inches of water as it goes down through the soil profile. And then also in there, we need, that the water portion makes up about a quarter of it, about 25%. And then we have to have some air in there too, because I'm going to show you a soil sample that is basically without oxygen. It'll look kind of gray in color. So we've got not quite 50% of it is mineral, a quarter of it or 25% of it's water, 25% of it's air or pore space, and then there's a small percentage in there what we call organic matter. And that's stuff that, like when you mow your grass or this time of year when leaves fall off of the trees, that stuff's organic matter. It was living at one time. There's all kind of critters that live within the soil. Earthworms, bacteria, fungus. All those things are organic matter. And then there's stuff that, because of the biological activity in the soil, they've converted it into what they call longer-term organic matter, or humus, H-U-M-U-S. So a lot of people refer to the biology in the soil as the living organic matter. That, like when you mow your yard, the grass or somebody harvests corn or soybeans, that crop residue, those plants that are left on top, that's the dead, and then the humus is considered the really dead stuff. It's been there for a good while. Some other things that we can look at that we'll get to later when we're trying to figure out what kind of soil we're dealing with is color. I already talked a little bit about texture, that gritty feel or that flour feel or that slimy feel. And I think with that, Miss Hafer's going to tell you about a little game we're going to play.
Okay, so we're going to play a game where we're going to explain a little bit better how it is that water moves through soil and how the size of those particles, the sand, silt, and clay, make an impact on how quickly the water can percolate or can travel down through the soil when it rains. Okay, so I'm going to divide you guys into 3 soil particles by your class. So you guys are going to be sand, all right? So I want my sand particles, I want you guys to stand right up here in a line. All right? Mrs. Odlevok's class, you guys are silt. All right, so what my silt particles need to do is I need you guys to sit on the bench right next to the picnic tables, your lunch tables. And you guys are clay. All right, so my clay particles, I need you guys to sit up along that bench there. Okay, now I'm just gonna randomly pull some of you guys out of each group. And you are gonna be the water molecules, or the little drops of water that go through the sand, silt and clay, go through the soil. Okay, so I'm just gonna randomly pull a bunch of kids. I would like you, and you, and you, and you to go stand up near the stage. That's 4. Let's see, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, you go stand up there. 10, 11, 12. All right, you guys go stand up there. All right, so you are the water molecules. So you have like a really important job. You get to percolate or travel through the soil. All right, so my sand particles. You guys are the biggest particle size. So that means that you take up the most space, and you also have the most space around you. So when water travels through the soil, when the soil has a lot of sand in it, the water travels through there pretty quickly, right? You say, yes, Ms. Hafer. Okay, so I want you guys to come out here. I want you to kind of spread out with your arms apart like this, and you need to be able to turn in a circle without hitting anybody else. Right? So you come out here, you can spread out. All right, stop. All right, I'm going to have you move a little closer. I want you guys to get close enough that you can just barely not touch the person next to you. Okay, so I'm going to move you over here. Okay, now put your arms out. You are sand. So you are sandy soil. My water molecules, what you guys get to do is you get to move your way through the sand to get to the back. All right, so if their arms are in the way, you can kind of move them like this a little bit. All right, you sand particles, move your arms a little bit, then move them back to where you had them to begin with. All right, I'm going to move you guys around a little more. All right, I want you to step one step that way, and you step one step that way, and you step up. There, we're good. Okay. All right, so sand particles like this. All right, arms and legs spread wide like this. Okay, water molecules, you may move through the sand. Don't run. We're not going to run. Okay, I heard you say they took the easy route, right? Yeah. Okay, well, if you're water, are you going to take the easiest route anyway because you're automatically going to go the easiest way? Sure. Okay, but that was pretty easy, right? Okay, so water molecules, let's move your way back up here. And stand up against the stage for me again. Oh, yeah, they're not going to understand that, but you're right. Okay, good job. Sand particles, you guys did awesome. I would like you guys are silt, right? Okay, I want my silt particles to move up here and my sand particles to sit down where the silt particles were. Okay, now silt is smaller than sand, right? Okay, so silt is a smaller particle size, so it has less pore space. Okay, so water flows a little bit less quickly through the silty soil. So what you guys are going to do is you're going to come back out and stand out here, but you're going to put your arms on your waist like this. And I want you to stand so that you can turn like this and barely touch the person next to you. Okay? So you guys come out here, spread yourself out. You're going to have to get a little closer together because remember your elbows need to just almost touch. All right, so I'm going to scoot you back here. I'm going to scoot you here. I'm going to scoot you back. Can you scoot back a little? All right, you two need to scoot way back. Like that, like that. You move over just a little bit over there. Okay, and you move over just a little bit. Okay, the last three girls in the back take one step forward. There we go. All right, so you can already tell there's not as much space here, is there? That's because silt is a smaller particle. So when you're moving through the silt particles this time, silt particles, you can turn either way, but you turn back the way that you started, okay? You don't need to do it unless they push through you, okay? So in other words, stop doing it right now. Still. All right, so you may now move through the silt.
Oh my God.
Now you don't have to plow through the silt. You can do it a little bit more. All right, so that was a little more difficult, right? Okay, so that pore space, that space in between those particles of soil is smaller in silt. So that's why it's harder to push through the silt if you have silty soil, if you're little drops of water. So when you guys come back through, you have to let them through. So none of this linebacker stuff. We're not doing that. You guys just turn nice and slowly and nicely. All right, water, you can move back through here. You don't have to push. Some aggressive silt particles going on there. All right. All right, silt particles. You are going to switch places with my clay particles. My clay particles, I want you to come up here. And stop. All right, now clay is the smallest particle size, which means that there's not a lot of space between those little tiny clay molecules. So what you guys get to do is I want you to stand so your shoulders are just barely touching. Okay, so just barely touching. Okay, I want you to take a step back. And you come up here. And you move in closer to her. Okay, so one of the things about clay, you guys listening? Hey, clay particles, zip it. All right, one of the things about clay is that when water moves through clay, clay stays separated. Okay, so when the water molecules are now moving through the clay, okay, you guys can turn to the side, but you have to stay turned that direction. Okay, only when the water molecules are moving through you. Okay, all right, now don't push. Again, this is not linebacker football. You can gently move through the clay particles. All right, you guys got to turn and let them through. Oh, you're all right. Okay, so that was a lot, right? Yeah, some people even fell over. Okay, now remember, when you move back through, how many of you guys, all of you guys were moved by the water, right? Yeah. Okay, so everybody needs to turn to the side because you were already kind of moved by the water. All right, Gently, water, move back through the clay. Gently. Yeah, they're doing all the different particles.
Yeah, all of them together.
Yeah.
That makes it.
Yeah, all the kids, yeah. Yeah. All right. All right, you guys. Now you guys we're going to do all three of you. All right, because a loam is a common, hey, water molecules. Need to listen, please. Right? Most soil that we have in Ohio is a loam, which means it's a mixture of sand, silt, and clay. All right? Most soil is not just sand or not just silt or not just clay. It's a loam, so it's a mixture. So what all of you guys get to do now is I want all of my soil particles to come out here. All right, stop. All right, remember, if you guys clap your hands to get people's attention. All right, remember, if you're a sand particle, how are you supposed to be standing? All right, so if you're a sand particle, you need to spread out. All right, if you're a silt, you need to have your hands on your hips, and you need to spread out a little bit too. All right, if you're clay, you're shoulder to shoulder. So let's spread out. So, are you guys silt or clay?
We're clay.
Okay. All right, so you guys are probably on the sides. You're good. Hey, guys! All right, so I want everybody to spread out just a little bit. Okay, if you're sand, silt, or clay, you need to have your arms out or be standing with your arms to your side. Now, when the water molecules go through, no pushing and shoving. You guys need to let them pass through, which means you need to turn to let them pass through. We're doing a little more pushing and shoving than what we need to do. All right, so water, you may flow through the soil. All right, okay, let's stand up. You're okay, honey. Up, up, up. Come on, guys. You're all right. You're okay. All right, let's clap. Okay, water. Back there. All right, did you guys notice that a lot of the water molecules, not the boy water molecules, but mostly the girl water molecules, took the easiest way around? Did you kind of notice that? How many of you went through the side where it was easier to pass through? Okay, well, the reason that water does that is because of gravity. Gravity pulls everything down. And if you're water, you're going to take the easiest or the path of least resistance. So the areas in the soil that are well drained, which means they have more sand in them, so they have more space, then the water will flow more evenly through those areas. Okay? So y'all understand how water flows through the pores in the soil? All right, you may sit back down with your class, please. I need can't make it fun. Which it's in the van. Well, it'll interfere with the mic probably. Okay.
thank you. All right, who has my sand particle?
Wait, what? Gave it to Carter.
Oh, they brought it back.
They did bring it
All
back.
right. Okay. All right, so we're talking about soil, but sometimes people call it dirt. And people that really appreciate soil kind of get offended when you call it dirt. Dirt's not wanted, but we want soil. So, you want to go next slide. So, we're talking about sand, and so sand is what? Is it the smallest? The biggest. All right. And what does sand feel like? Squishy. It's kind of gritty. So we have some sand here. Now, guys, be careful when you're passing that around, but you can feel it. Watch you don't dump it. All right. So when you guys, the water molecules, was sand easy to get through, or was it tough to get through? Easy. All right. So it's got to get through everybody.
Gotta
So
pass it, guys.
you got to pass it. All right. Silt. Is it big, medium, or small as far as particle size? Medium size. All right. So and the water molecules, how'd you guys move through it? It was a little more difficult. Okay. All right. So we have a lot of, and listen up, guys. Listen up. Listen. Yep. So when silt settles out, is it the first thing that settles out, the last thing that settles out, or the middle thing that settles out? Middle thing that settles out. So what I did this morning was I took some of this and I put it in this jar, but I didn't shake it up yet. So would you like to shake it up and see what happens? So while she's working on that, we'll go to our, what's the smallest particle? Clay. All right. So we have this small clay particle, and when it's mixed with water, does it settle out first, second, or third when we're talking about those? Third. So it kind of stays what we call suspended in the water. That's what gives us this cloudy look. You know, I think some of you guys so you can. Okay, you can probably quit shaking, maybe. So, we're talking about, you guys just finished up with rocks. Listen up, guys, listen up. Just finished up with rocks. So that's the parent material as it breaks down. What we got? We get into text. You didn't save the right one. So, well, did you go? Because it was down a couple. You see it on the slide. Oh well. All right. Well, there's different, we talked about, is there a texture slide on there? Texture and color? Yeah, texture. So we talked about sand being kind of gritty, and there's still, is that sand keep moving around over there, guys? The tub of sand? Yeah. Has everybody got a chance to feel it? So, and then silt kind of feels like flour in your hand, and then clay is going to be slimy. There's other things that we look at. Now this, that's more of a silty clay soil here, which we can pass all these around, and teachers can look at it too. This is kind of interesting here. When there's not enough oxygen in the soil and too much water, we call that, one of the soil classifications is called hydric. That's where your wetlands are located. But it'll be a gray color if there's a high water table. And I've got a chunk of pretty gray soil in here, so you guys can take a look at that. And then and just look at the different colors as you pass at it. Sure. Those of you that are up bond. We still on? Those that are shaking up bottles, if you want to stop. But what's floating on top would be some of that organic matter, and then you can just hold it still for a little bit and see what comes out. Then I'll just pass that down through there. This is more of a loam, a nice mix of this day we're talking about water taking the easiest path. So if you think about earthworm burrowing down in the soil, where do you think that water's going to go? It's going right down that earthworm. It's just that the plants and animals in the soil are very, very, very small. So we have all kinds of really cool relationships with the animals and plants in the soil, just like we do with the animals and plants that we know are in the forest. But they're all just really, really tiny. So soil is really full of living things. There's all kinds of living things in the soil. So the slide up there right now are some of the things in your yard or field over a 15-year period. They're really high output workers. And then also, if you look at some of those soils coming around there, if you guys see the roots, there's also root channels. When those plants die and those roots die and they become organic matter, that's another place for water to go down through. It's going to take those of you that took the easy way around. That's what they're going to do. So, and I've got four bags of soil here, and you guys can look at them. Look at the different colors that are in there. Compare them. Set them there on the floor next to each other. I think you had gotten some soil from North Carolina at one time that.
See the different colors in the soil? The minerals in the rocks are sometimes different colors. And the iron, which is the mineral that looks orange, if you have soil where your rocks have a lot of iron in it, then the soil looks more orange or red. All right, if you have soil that has less iron, it has maybe more quartz, so it has more sand, it's going to be lighter colored. And soils look different if we find them in the forest or if we find them in a desert. So they all look a little bit different, and there's lots of different kinds of soils because of the minerals in the rocks that break apart to form the soil, and because of the ecosystem where the soil is found. So if it's in a forest or if it's in a field or a wetland, that makes the soil look different too. Right? And when we look at soil, we dig what's called a profile, which is the layers of the soil. Soil forms in layers just like rocks do. So a profile is if you dug a hole in the ground about 6 feet deep and you jumped in that hole and you looked up and down, you would be seeing the profile of the soil. Right? So there's different layers to the soil. The top layer is the organic layer, and that's where the humus is. All right, the bottom layer, way down at the bottom, is the bedrock. The bedrock is the stuff that's deep underground. It's hard to get through that, right? And in between, the soil is a little bit different. You have topsoil in the top that plants use for growth. And then as you get down towards the bottom, there's less pore space, less holes in that soil because the soil's compacted. Anybody know what compacted means? Anybody have your brother or sister sit on you? Yeah. Okay, can you breathe when they sit on you? No. That's because your lungs are compacted, which means somebody's pushing the weight on you, keeps you from being able to breathe because there's no space, all right? And the heavier the soil is above, as it pushes down, it pushes out the air in the soil because air is a pretty important part of soil. Okay, so that's why soil that's down in the bottom doesn't have as much space because it's been pushed, the air's been pushed out of it. Okay? Yep, you guys have to keep passing it. Yep. Does anybody have any questions? Yes. More bedrock. Well, if you go really far down, you get to magma. You get to the crust of the earth and then the magma, which is the liquid rock in the center. You're not going to dig down that far to break out the earth. That's like miles and miles and miles and miles and miles. Yep. It's probably more than that. How do rocks go in a circle? How do rocks get in there? Well, the rocks in the soil break apart. Did you guys talk about weathering yet? Do they do that? Okay. So how a big rock gets from a big rock into the little pieces that make the soil up, that's called weathering. Okay, and weathering happens by temperature, by wind, by water, by ice. It's the process of breaking big rocks into the little pieces that mix up in the soil. So how long do you guys think in Ohio it takes us to get an inch of soil? Yeah, about 500 years. Okay, in a rainforest, do you think it takes less time or more time to get an inch of soil? You would think less, but it's actually a lot more. And that's because in Ohio, or in the United States, most of our soil, we have all those plants that fall down on the soil, and we have the weathering is a lot faster, but in a rainforest, does it get cold? Yeah, no. So the rocks weather very, very slowly, and if you have dead leaves that fall from the top of the trees in a rainforest are so high, those leaves almost never make it to the ground. So because they get eaten in the other layers of the forest. So rainforest soils develop very, very, very slowly. Well, think how tall the trees are in a forest, in a rainforest. Oh, like way taller. Yeah, taller than the school. Yeah, we can. Okay. So, one more time. There are how many particles in the soil? 3. What's the biggest one? Sand. So that means water. How does water flow through the sand? Really well, right? The particles are big, so there's lots of space. All right, what's the next size particle? Nope. Silt. All right, so with silt, does water move really fast through silt, really slow, or kind of in between? In between, because the spaces are smaller, the pores are smaller, but they're not as small as the third one, and that one is clay. Okay, so soil particles that are clay are really close together, so water flows very slowly through clay. Okay, so because the pore sizes are really small. Here's a good way to remember it is, can you put your arm through a soccer net? Yeah. Okay, so that's like your sand. Can you stick your arm through a container that has sand in it? Yeah. Yeah, but you're going to have to push pretty hard, right? So that's silt. Can you put your hand through that brick wall? No. Yeah. So that's like clay. Well, you could if you picked at it for a long time. Okay. And then what is a soil called in Ohio that's a mixture of sand, silt, and clay? A loam, good. And are most of our soils in Ohio a loam? Yes. They have different percentages or different amounts of sand, silt, and clay. Some have more, some have less. All right? All right, well, we had a pie chart, but it didn't. All right, a pie chart is a big round circle, right? Okay, so if I'm going to make soil, there are a couple things that I need to have. The ingredients of soil. Just like when you're making a cake. All right? The biggest ingredient in the soil, I already told you guys this. Who remembers it? Nope. Those are the particle sizes. Rock. Good. Good. Rocks. And as rocks weather and break down, 45% of what makes up soil in Ohio is weathered rock. So that's like 45 cents out of a dollar. Okay, that's a lot. That's almost half. And then we have about 25% water in our soil in Ohio. We have about 25% air and about 5% organic material or humus. So that's a very small amount, but it's actually a really important thing to have those. That's the dead plants and animals that are in the soil. Why is air important in the soil? Yes. Well, It's for the same reason that you can move faster through the sandy soil. It makes spaces. Okay, so when you have air in the soil, you have air for the animals underground, but you also have spaces. Air makes spaces in the soil. So plant roots can move, and so animals can move. Okay, water. We have a lot of water. One of the cool things about soil that it does for people is it holds water. So when it rains a lot, it doesn't flood because it holds on to the water. So when plants need it, they can suck it up with their roots. Okay, and also because it absorbs water so it doesn't flood. So that's pretty important. Right? And then the rocks, the 45% that is the weathered rocks, and the minerals that are in the rocks. And what do we say? The minerals are important. What does that have to do with the soil? What does that have an influence on? If I go back to the slide. I'll find it. So what did I tell you guys? The one on the right. Sorry, why is it that color? The minerals, exactly, because of the minerals. Okay, the minerals in the soil. And also where the soil's found. Soil that's from the wetland. You guys remember the really dark clay soil that we call that hydric soil, which just means that water doesn't go through it very fast. All right, that thick clay soil, okay, is a different color because it's in a wetland. Right? So if it was in a forest, it would be a little bit different color if it was in a field. Okay, because of the plants that you have in a forest and a field. So the organic material, that little 8% or 5%, isn't very much, but it's super important. Okay, because that helps us determine the color and where we found the soil. So if somebody brings me soil that's that really dark, thick color, and it kind of has this smell to it, I was like, well, that's some wetland soil, because that's where it came from. Or if you dig a hole in the forest in Ohio, the soils that we have in Ohio in the woods is kind of a really dark brown. Because usually there's a lot of that organic material, those decomposed leaves and other plants and animals in the soil. So that's why it has different colors. Okay? Because of what the soil's made out of, the rock. All right? And I really wish that that would have saved, because I know I saved the right one. Let me see if there's anything else. Yeah, so we're going to look at these different kinds of soils really quick. So you have forest, look at what's above ground. What's above ground tells you a lot about what the soil is going to look like underground. So in a forest, that soil is going to look like different than, say, a grassland or a prairie, because the plants are different, right? And when the plants die, they go into the soil. So look at the wetland soils. The plants are different. So is the soil. Look at the desert. Do desert soils have as much water in them as Ohio soil does? No, because you're right, because it doesn't rain in the desert. So does that mean that soils are different wherever we find them? Yep. All right, so there's some desert soil. There's all different kinds of soil. All right, so soil is pretty important stuff. How many of you guys like to eat? And you like to breathe, right? Okay, so you eat and breathe because of the soil. Because the soil gives plants what they need to grow. Plants give us oxygen, and they either give us food directly, or they feed the animals that we eat. Soils do need water, yep. So, but some soils have more water. All right, wildlife needs soil. We're going to skip that because that's not that interesting. So how on earth could we live without soil? It'd be pretty darn difficult, wouldn't it? You're right, we wouldn't be alive. Soil's pretty important. Soil and water are pretty important. All right, do you guys have any soil questions? Yes. Well, the plants do help you breathe, and it's not just trees. All plants produce oxygen for you to breathe. But what do the plants have to grow? And what are they growing in? Soil. The soil, right. So plants help you breathe, but without the soil, we wouldn't have any plants, because the soil gives the plants nutrients, which are like vitamins to help them grow, And the soil gives plants a place to grow, a place to put their roots down and hold on so they don't blow over when it's windy, right? All right. So without plants, without soil, we wouldn't have plants, and without plants, we wouldn't have any life. So that's pretty important. Yes? Well, soil has nutrients in it. You know all that the dead plants that lay on the ground and the dead animals that die in the soil? Well, they add nutrients, which are like vitamins, that help plants to grow. So that's how soil helps plants grow. Yes. How does soil help you? Well, because without soil, we don't have food or oxygen. So soil helps us a lot. Yeah, but do trees have to grow in the soil? Yep. Can you take a tree and put it on the floor and expect it to grow? No. So the plants have to have soil. It has to have sun, it has to have water, it has to have soil because it needs the nutrients, it has to have carbon dioxide. It's the stuff you breathe out when you take a breath. Yep. All right, well you guys did a good job today, so pat yourself on the back. Awesomeness. All right. And we will send with you an activity book that'll help you kind of remember some of the things that you learned today about soil. All righty. Good job.